Shabbat Shalom. Tzahorayim Tovim. Good afternoon. Baruch haba. We welcome you to the teaching ministry of Harlingen Messianic Synagogue. Before we get started, just a couple of announcements for you. We still have several people who are out sick today, so please be in prayer for them. The weather changes, of course, and this is the flu and cold season, so a lot of people suffering with that. As well, be praying for Roel. Um, he's been diagnosed with the beginning of Parkinson's disease, and so please keep in. That's the balance issues that he has. So please be much in prayer for him with that. Also pray for Keely. She's been having some health issues. She went to doctor, got a diagnosis, and it's serious, but we're going to pray that God will work with her and touch her and heal her. Josh has a migraine this morning, so be praying for him. He's with us and he's a trooper, fought through, but be praying for him. A lot of weather related issues there, so please be much in prayer for him. Charity also has some health issues that we're leaving in the Lord's hands, and so please be praying for her. A lot of things going on, so let's be in prayer for one another, and let's go to the throne. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, we love you. We thank you for loving us, Father, for watching over us, for bringing us through this week, Father, bringing us to this place at this time to worship you together as a body, Father, and then now to study your word. We ask today that you would speak to our hearts as we study these things, Father, as we study how to pray, how to get our prayers answered, what our reactions are supposed to be, what our emotions are supposed to be. Father, as we go through the test that you set before us, proving us, Father, sharpening us, refining us, bringing us into alignment with your word and your will. And so help us to understand today these things that are set before us. We ask in the name of Yeshua Mashiach, through his merit, through his righteousness, that you would be honored and glorified. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight. For you are my Lord, my rock, my Redeemer. Father, open our ears to hear, our minds to understand, and our hearts to trust you. In his name. And all God's people said. So we are studying the Sefirot, the attributes of God, because in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, he says, "Let us make man in our image and after our likeness." What does it mean to be made in the image of God? It means to be made with his attributes, that he created all of mankind with the attributes, not just you, not just me, not just those who believe and trust. He created every single human being in his image and after his likeness. The people we love, the people that we do not love, the people who we get along with, and those who we despise. Those who live good, godly lives, and those who are living their lives like they are themselves from hell. Every single human being has been created in the likeness of God, with the attributes of God. You say, if that is so, why do they act the way they act? Why do they live the way they live? Why are they doing what they're doing and saying what they are saying? Why are they being so evil and so wicked? And the answer is because at the fall, the attributes were shut off, so to speak. Because at the fall, man was disfellowshipped from God. The communication, the relationship is broken. These attributes are a means by which we have fellowship with God. These are the means by which we have relationship with God. But when we sin, the relationship is broken. And always keep in mind that it's not the size of the sin. Because keep in mind that Adam and Chava only took one bite out of one piece of fruit one time, and that was sufficient to break the relationship. They didn't kill anybody. They didn't murder. They didn't commit adultery. They didn't, all they did was take one bite of one piece of fruit one time, and that was sufficient because God had said, on the day that you eat of the fruit thereof, you shall surely die. Why is it that we will find God calling out to Adam and Chava, where are you? Where are you? Because he doesn't know where they are? Because he can't see them? Because he can't find them? He's God. Because the relationship is broken, the fellowship is broken, so that now he says, where are you? We're not going to take the time today to go through the previous Sefirot, the previous attributes. You can listen to those on the previous videos. We're on YouTube. And so you can go back and watch the previous videos if you have not heard these things and heard what we're talking about. We are in Netzach. Josh, if you would put the slide up. We are in Netzach. Netzach is the third attribute. The first to be on the right-hand side. This is the side of mercy. The left-hand side is the side of judgment, discipline. And so we leave Malchut into Yesod, Malchut, kingdom, into Yesod, the foundation, which is righteousness. And righteousness, being right with God, leads us into Netzach. Netzach is the classroom. What are we taught in this classroom? Endurance. To endure. To go through. And so we have been studying. Netzach teaches us how to pray. You see, in a few weeks, in a couple of weeks, we will be finished with Netzach, and we're going to go across to Hod. And Hod is the place where the prophets got their prayers answered. This is where Moshe prays and the sea parts. That's Hod. Hod is where David, the king, the boy, the shepherd, puts the rock in the sling, and the giant comes tumbling down. Hod is where Elijah stands on the mountaintop with the prophets of Baal and calls down fire from the very heaven that consumes not only the sacrifice, but consumes the wood, and the rocks of the altar, consumes the water in the ditch that he had placed around it. And then he calls forth, it had not rained for 3.5 years, and he calls forth rain. And it rains so hard that it floods before he can get home. Hold is where Yeshua is praying in the garden for you and for me. Hold is where Yeshua brings salvation to mankind. But before you get to Hod, you must go through Netzach. You must learn, we must learn endurance. And so we have been discussing how to get our prayers answered. And the simple answer to getting our prayers answered is this: to pray the will of God. If we pray, if we ask anything in His will, He will do it. And the truth is, many times we're not asking according to His will. What is it that He desires? What is it that He wants? What is it that He requires? Too often our prayers are after our own will, after our own desires, what I want. So that the book of James tells us, you have not because you ask not, and when you do ask, you ask amiss, that you might spend it on the lust of your own self. We pointed out to you last week that Yeshua, the Messiah, rarely prays for himself. His prayers are almost always for others. And in fact, the only place in Scripture where we find Yeshua actually praying for himself is when he's in the garden before he's to be executed. He performs no miracles for himself. And what is it that he prays in the garden? He prays that the will of God be done. He prays for strength, for unity. But then where he prays for himself, it's just a few short verses. And then what does he do? He spends 2 chapters praying for you and me. He spends most of the time in the garden before his death, before his execution. He spends that time praying for others. Because he was not here to serve himself. He was here to serve, first of all, the Father. And then to serve others, to bring us salvation. Whenever he prays, however, we find these words that he constantly prays. He says, I did not come to do my own will, but I came to do the will of the one who sent me. He said, the words that I speak, they are not of myself. The things that I do, they are not of myself. These are the things of the Father. These are the words that the Father is speaking. These are the things that the Father wants done. We pray to God that I want this done and I would like that done. It is not frequent in many people's lives that we say, I want the will of God done, regardless of what it is, regardless of where it takes me, regardless of what it would cost me. Because, my friend, frequently the cost is great by human standards and in human terms. This is why Yeshua, our rabbi, says to us that to follow him is to follow a difficult road. We're warned ahead of time, and in fact, he tells us, he says, no man begins building a tower, but that he does not first count the cost, lest he get halfway through the building and he runs out of funding and he becomes an embarrassment. He becomes a laughing stock to his neighbors. He says no king sets an army out on the road to war, to battle, but that he first does not take stock of the supplies that are necessary to make sure that the army can go to the extent it needs to go and has the ability to do what it needs to do. And so we are warned in this walk with him to count the cost. It is going to cost us. You see, no relationship is without cost. No relationship is without cost. It's going to cost me something. And I must be prepared. You remember those days of young love? You remember those days? When, as Sonny and Cher sang, It's Just You and Me, Baby? You remember those days when it was you and me against the world? Perhaps mom did not approve and dad did not approve. Perhaps friends did not approve. But that was okay. We could live in a cardboard box together so long as I have you. It is said that over 50% of all marriages end up in divorce today. Because, here's the reason why. the couple in that relationship, the person in that relationship did not count the cost. Every relationship has a price. And what is that price? Giving. 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 Giving what? Giving how much? Giving all. Everything. You've heard it said that giving, that love, that marriage is a 50-50 relationship. 50 my side, 50 your side. No, that is incorrect. Marriage is a 100% relationship. Marriage is 100%, not 50-50. 100% that I pour my life into her, and 100% that she pours her life into me. That I give everything for her, and that she gives everything for me. That's marriage. That's what makes a marriage last. And the same thing is true in your relationship with God. It is not 50-50. It is 100%. He has poured 100% of himself into you. It is time that we learn to pour 100% of ourselves back into God. As he has given to us his best, his one and only, the love of his existence, his only begotten Son. He gave to us everything he had. And yet the truth is we are, most of us, unwilling to give to him even the 50%. Do you realize that Shabbat is 1 day out of 7? That's not 50%, it's 1/7. Yet we have a hard time, a difficult time giving to God. Not 50%, not half, 1/7. Much less than 50%. Our tithing. A tithe is but percent, not 50. Do you know that if you won the Mega Millions lottery, recently, last month, it was over $1 billion, I believe. One of them was. That right off the bat, before you ever see a nickel, a penny of those winnings, the government deducts 40% off the top. So when you win $1.2 billion, you don't get $1.2 billion. 40% goes straight to the government right off the top. God only asks you for 10. And I should not say ask, I should say God requires 10. Not the government requires almost half. God does not require half. He requires only 1/10. But what is the truth? Many people, even I should say most people, have a very difficult time giving to God 1/10. He gave 100% of himself. He poured 100% of himself into you and me. How much are we willing to give back to him? Because the truth is, a 50-50 relationship only stands a 50% chance of making it. If you want the relationship to succeed, it must be 100% of both parties pouring themselves into that relationship. Now today, we're going to look at this one more thing in God answering our prayer. And next week we will discuss what our response should be to him. And we will be done with Netzach. What my emotions should be, what my spirit should be, what my mentality should be. Why do we need to discuss that? Because sometimes God says no. There are times where God's answer to your request is no. He's not going to give you that. He's not going to do that. He's not going to take you down that pathway. Many times, his answer is no. However, understand that you're not alone in this. In fact, he even, in essence, says no to Yeshua. Turn, if you would, see if I can find it. I've got too many tabs open again. In the book of The, the book of Luke, chapter 22. Where we find Yeshua in the garden. Verse 39, and Yeshua came out and went as usual to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he reached the place, he said to them, pray that you will not enter into temptation. Those words would ring familiar to them, for what did he say when you pray? Pray in this manner, Our Father, who art in heaven, holy is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and lead us not into temptation. And now he instructs them, you remember how I taught you to pray? Pray. This is the time. This is the place. This is what it was all about. Everything that I taught you, it's here, it's now. Everything that you saw me doing and heard me saying, it's about this time, it's about this place, it's about this day and this hour. It's all come. So pray that you will not enter into temptation. And he pulled back about a stone's throw from them and got on his knees, and he began to pray, saying, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. He asked the Father to take the cup of bitterness, the cup of shame, the cup of sinfulness that was about to come upon him, that he was about to bear the sins of every human being in the entire world, take it all to himself. We know he did not ask one time, but he asked 3 times. Ask you this, Josh, if you can kind of wiggle the antenna on the microphone just a little bit. Keep getting dead spots. How many of you ever get stressed out? You ever get stressed out? How many of you get so stressed out that you can't sleep at night? Did it ever happen to you? Do you ever get so stressed out that you become very agitated? How many of you have become so stressed out in your situation the pressure is so strong upon you that your capillaries, your blood vessels begin to burst, and blood actually begins pouring through your skin? That's the stress that he was under. And he asks 3 times for the Father to remove this cup. Do you know where the scripture says that he suffered all things like we, yet without sin? Even this he suffered like we. Because the response of the Father to this request is no. You have to do this. You have to go through this. You have to drink this cup. All of it. Even as he had instructed the disciples that very evening to drink it all. So now he must drink it all himself. And 3 times he asked the Father to remove this cup from him. And 3 times it is intimated to us that the response of the Father to him is no, you have to do this. And understand the price that he is paying in this relationship. Understand the price as best as we can. It's not just about the physical suffering and the physical death. In fact, that really had no bearing on it. It is the taking of sin to himself, the spotless, perfect Lamb of God, becoming sin for us. So that we could become righteous. And what is his response to the answer of no? Acceptance. Hear me, because this is what is to be our response when the answer is no. Acceptance of the will of God. That's it. My response to God when he tells me no is to accept his will. But not only to accept his will, and this is why we must go in next week into what our response to him is to be. We are to accept his will with joy, with peace, with contentment. When God says no to me, I am to accept his will as his will, to remain content, to remain at peace, to remain in his joy. I'm not to fall apart. I'm not to blow apart. I'm to be at peace. And what is it that brings me the peace? What is it that brings me the contentment? It is this, that God's will is being done in my life, that God has a purpose for this, whether I see it or not, whether I understand it or not, and hear me, most especially, whether I feel it or not. God's will is being accomplished. And what he does, hear me, what he does for my well being, for my good. And we will say, in response to all of this, because we have said it, I don't understand what good this accomplishes. The reason why you do not understand what good it accomplishes is because you do not have the correct perspective. We are very limited in our visuals. We are very limited in our perspective. Only God can truly see what it is all about. Only God can truly, only he truly sees and knows the beginning and the ending. And he sees it all as one. And so we hesitate at the unknown, and we hesitate at the dread, at the things that we're looking at, because we cannot see past that. We cannot understand. Oftentimes we fall short when we are praying that the will of God be done. When we understand and realize that the path that the will of God is going to take us on is going to be a very difficult one. One that may bring tears and suffering. In fact, in Judaism, concerning the death of a loved one, the sages warn us to be careful with how we mourn. That Judaism does not permit the mourning to go too deeply. Lest in grieving too deeply, we demonstrate our lack of trust in the will of God. So we are given 30 days to mourn. And where do we get the tradition of 30 days to mourn? This is the time span that Yitzhak and Yismael mourned for Avraham Avinu. When Abraham died, Yitzhak and Ismail, Isaac and Ismail, mourned for 30 days. And so in Judaism, the mourning period consists of this. 7 days. For 7 days, we do what is called sitting Shiva. Shiva means seven. It's where we get the word Shabbat from. We sit for 7 days. In the 7 day period, we don't leave the house. We don't go out. We're not doing those kinds of things. We are absorbing. We're dealing with the emotion of having lost a loved one. At the end of the Shiva, at the end of the 7 days, now we take a bath, we bathe, we dress, we begin to go out. Not all exuberant, no. The wound is still raw. And for another 23 days, 7 plus 23 equals 30. So for another 23 days, we tone it down. We keep it toned down. Process the emotions, process the grieving, process the loss. Starting to make our way slowly back in the world. Why? Because we are still here. And we still have lives to live. We must still continue living. We have to get back into our lives. But after the 30 days, we, as it were, we rev the engines a bit. That is, we get back now into the full swing of life, back to living. Why only 30 days? It doesn't mean that you don't miss the person. It doesn't mean that you're not sad. It doesn't mean that you don't have emotions, that those kinds of things. It doesn't mean that. But you see, you must return to your life. You must get back into living. And so the sages tell us, listen, if I spend too long at this, I may not come out of it. If I spend too long in this, if I go too deeply in my grieving, this is telling me that I do not agree with the plan of God. I do not agree. I disagree with his will. This is exactly what Rav Shaul means when he says to us that we do not mourn for the dead as the heathen do, as the unbelievers do. Why? Because we know that God has a plan and we're in agreement with his plan, and we must align ourselves with the will of God. It was the will of God for this person to be taken out of the world, out of your life, away from you. When I grieve too hard for that person, I'm saying that I don't agree with God, with what He's done. I cannot let go. I understand. But we need to change our mindset about the will of God. In fact, I read to you last week, and so let's go there again to the book of Philippians chapter 2. Excuse me, that's I want Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12. Therefore, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also get rid of every weight and entangling sin, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Remember, I pointed out last week, that's Netzach. Looking on Yeshua, the author and perfecter of our trust of emunah, of our trust. Do I trust God? Do I trust His will? Not just when things are going good or okay or fine, but when things are falling apart, do I trust His will? Am I able to say to Him, it's okay with me, it's all right with me? Am I able to say to Him, I accept this, I agree with this? Am I able to say to Him, do with me as you will? That is trust. And in fact, our Messiah teaches us that we are to trust Him even as a little child trusts their father. And in fact, He says, unless you come to me that way, you do not enter the kingdom. Saying that when it comes to God and when it comes to the will of God and when it comes to the things that He has placed that are entering into our lives, we must dispel the doubts and the fears. We must cast these things off of us so that we might rise up in our souls, in our spirit, to the heavenly domain. We must learn to trust Him, even and especially when He says no. He is the perfecter of our trust. who for joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, though he despised the shame. And now he is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. What? For joy. What was his mentality? What was his emotion? As he accepted the will of God, he counted it a joyful thing to do. Why? Because he knew that the Father was using him, was taking him through this for purpose, that purpose being the salvation of mankind. So then the book of James tells us, consider it all joy. Chapter 1, verse 2. Consider it not the good things, not the easy stuff, not the things that you would bring to yourself, not the things that you do agree with, but he says, consider it all joy. Everything that is in your life is in your life for a reason. Then count that for joy. When you encounter the different kinds of trials, knowing that the testing of your trust produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect work. Let it do what God has sent it to do. When God sends testings to you and to me, he sends these to us with purpose. Let it do its work. He has a reason for bringing this to your life. There are no accidents with God. There are no accidents with God. This thing that is in your life is the plan of God for your life. It's in his plan. That's why it's there. To think otherwise is to say that God's lost control here in this area. He's not in control here. Is he or is he not in control? Of what is he in control? Is he not in control of all things? Very quiet. Is he not in control of all things? Then he is even in control of the sad parts, the bitter parts, the hard parts, the difficult parts. He's even in control of that. It is his plan for you, for me to go through this. You've heard it said, it's a bitter pill to swallow. Eh? You've also heard Mary Poppins sing, just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Just a spoonful of sugar. What is the spoonful of sugar? The sweetness that God has chosen me for this time, for this purpose, to take me through this so that his will would be done. That he would be magnified, honored, glorified through this thing in my life. That is the honey. That is the sweetness. Therefore, we are instructed to allow the test to do its perfect work. The word perfect there means to finish what it has been sent to do. So that you may be perfect and complete and lacking nothing. It is perfecting you so that you will be perfect. I which I speak, I myself was struck down with cancer. And it very nearly ended my life. In fact, there were 5 times in less than a year's time where I was very, very close to death. And the final time, which was in February, this time of the year, 7 years ago, I was in a coma. Lying in the ICU. And the doctors were giving me 24 hours to live. I know what I'm talking about. When I was first diagnosed with the cancer, the doctor said to me, "You have a large tumor." And we're going to have to send you for testing and biopsies and all kinds of things. When Miss Wilma and I were driving away from that appointment, on our way home, and I was going to have to tell my children and my sister and my mother that I did not know if we did not know if I was going to be here for another year. Because it was very serious. And honestly, the doctors did not have much hope in saving me. As we were driving home, I told her, "We must not be sad about this. We're not going to cry. We're not going to grieve like that. We're not going to do that. I don't want that." Why? Because this is the will of God. This is His plan. I have been in ministry for some 40 years, and I have taught on these things. I have taught about this. I have spoken to it many times in messages and sermons. And I cannot go around telling people to trust God and to accept the will of God in their lives if I'm not willing to do it in my own life when my time comes. Because if that's the case, then it's just a lot of talk. And so I told her, I am determined in my own heart that I will practice what I preach, and I will accept the will of God in this, and I will rejoice in it. It was not easy. There were the twinges of fear. There were doubts. There always is. We're humans. But when those things would begin to rise up in me, I would push them down within myself. I would pray to God, ask Him for strength, ask Him for endurance, and ask Him for peace. Can I tell you, in that year's time, God is my witness. My wife will tell you, I did not lose one night's sleep with fear. There were other reasons why I lost night's sleep, a lot of it having to do with medication, but never for fear. My sleep cycles changed because of the hospitalizations, but never for fear. In fact, I learned to pray every night when I went to bed. The last things off of my lips before God were this: I lay my head down in peace. And I ask that you would fill me with peace. Give us a peaceful night tonight. And awake us in the morning in peace, and may tomorrow be a day of peace. And to this very day, that is how I end my prayer before I go to bed. For 7 years, I have prayed that. The weekend after I was diagnosed, Richard and Charity had rented a place down on the island. We went down there, and I sat them down, and I explained to them, do not cry around me. I don't want that. I told them, as I had told my wife, I have people in heaven. I have people that have gone before me that I haven't seen. I haven't seen my father in almost 20 years. He's gone. I have both of my grandmothers. I have my grandfathers whom I never knew, who I never met. I have friends. My best friend in high school was killed in a car accident his first year of college. My father-in-law, my mother-in-law. There are many people that I would love to see, that I would love to be with again. And so I told them, if God chooses for me to live, that's great. But if God chooses to take me home, that's also great. Either way, I win. To live or to die, I cannot lose. And God chose to spare my life. And I am now on 7 years cancer free. But not without close calls, not without hardships, and not without pain, much suffering. I came out of that coma, had horrendous visions coming through, coming back. Some of those I have shared with you in previous messages. I can tell you those stories, but I cannot describe for you what I saw and what I experienced. But I will tell you that I was caught between worlds for a few days. And my brother had sent me a YouTube video of a song that we used to sing growing up as children. That said, let's talk about Jesus. The King of Kings is He, the Lord of Lords supreme through all eternity. The great I am, the way, the truth, the life. Let's talk about Jesus more and more. As I was coming out of the fog, and she had brought me my phone, and I was trying to wrestle with all of the things that had happened to me, everything that I had been going through. And as I was wrestling with all of that, and I was in great depression, I was in pain. I had tubes running in and out of my body. My brain was in a fog. I saw that video there, and I turned it on, and it began to play. And I began to worship the Lord. And as I began to worship the Lord, the demons that I had seen and being caught between the two worlds began to fade away from me. The fog began to lift from my brain, and I was coming back, and I played that song over and over and over for a day. I played it over and over. Everybody who came into my room, I played that song. And God lifted me up. And He healed me. And that's why I'm sitting here before you today. And that's why I speak the way I do. That's why I teach the way I do, because God gave me. God had a plan for me. And He wanted me to experience some things so that I could express them to you. I would not know these things if I had not tasted of them myself. Even as we could say concerning our Messiah, that how could He understand? How can God understand me? He's never been here. He's never been in this life. He's never had this human body under the curse, under the weight of sin. How can He understand me? But we have a high priest who does understand and who does feel, because He has been tested in every way, just as we have been. And yet He never sinned. And so just Maybe, perhaps, God is taking you through some deep waters so that you can understand what some other people are going through at this time. Maybe he's taking you through some deep waters because down the road there's going to be someone who needs your word of faith, who needs your encouragement, who needs your prayer, who needs your love and your compassion, because unlike other people who have never been there, you have been there and you understand. And I'm telling you today that that is why sometimes God says, no, you have to go through this. As we close, the lead singer of Casting Crowns, the contemporary Christian music group Casting Crowns, the lead singer, and I'm sorry I don't know what his name is. I believe the story goes this way. Was at a concert in which a mother had brought her daughter because she had just recently been diagnosed with cancer. And so they had gone through the concert. They worshiped the Lord with the music and all. They enjoyed the concert. And afterwards, they met the lead singer of Casting Crowns. And he was touched by their story. And so he began, they traded email addresses and such, and he began communicating with the young lady, with the mother, keeping in touch with them and keeping in touch with them, but the cancer kept getting worse and getting worse. The mother emailed that the child was going downhill and things were not looking good, to please pray, please, please pray. And this man was so touched, so moved. As he was praying, he began to write down words. He felt the mother's anguish and he felt her pain and the worry and all that comes with this, a child being sick on a deathbed, watching the child slowly go down. And why was God not healing? Why was God not touching? Why was God not moving in this case? So many people were praying for that child, and yet the child continued to deteriorate. How could this be? And he began to write these words, which will be familiar to most of you. I was sure by now, God, that you would have reached down and wiped our tears away, stepped in and save the day. But once again, I say, Amen. And it's still raining. As the thunder rolls, I barely hear your whisper through the rain. I'm with you. And as your mercy falls, I raise my hand and praise the God who gives and takes away. And I will praise you in the storm. And I will lift my hands. For you are who you are, no matter where I am. And every tear I've cried, you hold in your hand. You never left my side. And though my heart is torn, I will praise you in this storm. I remember when I stumbled in the wind. You heard my cry to you and raised me up again. My strength is almost gone. How can I carry on if I cannot find you? But as the thunder rolls, I barely hear your whisper through the rain. I'm with you. And as your mercy falls, I raise my hands and praise. I praise the God who gives and takes away. And I will praise you in this storm. I will lift my hands, for you are who you are, no matter where I am. And every tear I've cried, you hold in your hand. You've never left my side. And though my heart is torn, I will praise you in this storm. I lift my eyes unto the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And I will praise you in this storm. He wanted to play that song for the mother and for the child. But the child died. Before he could get there. The first time he was going to sing, they were going to sing this song. He invited the mother to come to the concert. The mother was weeping as they sang. He was weeping as he sang. But praise God, they did. And after the concert was over, the mother came up and she told the band, This is what God wanted. Hard, difficult, but this is what God wanted. And the words to this song fit the heart and the mind of my daughter exactly how she died. I can tell you this, that song has touched countless lives around the world through these years. It's played at countless funerals every day, bringing comfort to the brokenhearted. And perhaps it was God's will to take that child so that hundreds of thousands of other lives could be comforted through the words that were caused by her death. Because God works in mysterious ways. And you may not understand where the will of God is taking you. But upon this one thing you can rely, you can trust. It is for your good, it is for the good of others, and it will bring honor and glory to his name. And we are called to count it all joy. We're called to praise him in the storm. My Father, my King, I love you. I thank you for seeing me through, that you have healed me. You have allowed me to continue living with my wife and my children, with my grandchildren, with my only grandson, who was born just weeks after that last event. How precious they are to me. How special. Because they are the vision out of one who was as good as dead. You have blessed me beyond measure. And for this I am most grateful. And I will never cease telling my story that you gave to me and how you saved me and lifted me up. Father, help us to praise you even in what we see as the bad times. That you are still there. That you still say to us, I am with you. I will never leave you. I'll never forsake you. You are my special treasure. You are my chosen one. You brought us into this with purpose, for purpose. To help others, to lift up the spirits of others, to know what other people are facing and going through. most of all to glorify your name, to bring honor, to magnify you, so that the world may see you in us. Help us to remember these things, that when life is difficult and hard, it's not without purpose. It's difficult and it's hard for a reason. And sometimes you say no. Then help us to learn to say, that's okay. Help us to learn to say, I accept your will, and I will walk with contentedness and joy in the path that you have set before us, and I will praise your name. May this be so in our lives. We ask in the name of Yeshua Mashiach, through his righteousness. And all God's people said, let's all stand. Lift up your hands. Yivreka Adonai ve'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha ve'yasem lecha shalom. May Adonai bless you and keep you. May Adonai shine his face upon you and be gracious unto you. May Adonai lift up his countenance upon you and fill you with peace. From the Prince of Peace, Yeshua Mashiach, the Imel.